ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय। ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
ओम नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय।
नारायणं नमस्कृत्य
नारायणं नमस्कृत्य
नरं चैव नरोत्तमं
नरं चैव नरोत्तमं
देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं
देवीं सरस्वतीं व्यासं
ततो जयमुदीरयेत्।
ततो जयमुदीरयेत्।
नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु
नष्टप्रायेषु अभद्रेषु
नित्यं भागवत सेवया
नित्यं भागवत सेवया
भगवती उत्तमश्लोके
भगवती उत्तमश्लोके
भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी।
भक्तिर्भवति नैष्ठिकी।
Reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 1, Chapter 7, Text 26. Kim
किम्
idam
इदं
svit
स्वेत्
kuto
कुतो
veti.
वेति
Kim idam svit kuto veti.
किमिदं स्वेत् कुतो वेति
Deva deva
देवदेव
na
न
vedmi
वेद्मि
aham.
अहं
Deva deva na vedmyaham.
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
Sarvataha
सर्वतः
mukham
मुखम्
ayati
आयाति
tejaha.
तेजः
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेजः
तेजः
परमा
परमा
दारुणं
दारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
तेजः परमदारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वेत्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेज परम दारुणं
तेजः परमदारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वेत्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेज परम दारुणं
तेज परमदारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेज परम दारुणं
तेज परमदारुणं किमिदं स्वेत्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
किम् इदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुटो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखमायेति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेज परमदारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखम् आयाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेजः परं दारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वता मुखम् आयाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेज परमदारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
किम इदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहं
सर्वतो मुखम आयाति
सर्वतो मुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणं
तेज परम दारुणं
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम्
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देव न वेद्म्यहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
सर्वतोमुखम् आयाति
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेज परमदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम्
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेवेन वेद्यहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेज परमदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम्
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेज परमदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम्
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
सर्वतोमुखम् आयाति
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेज परमानदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम्
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम्
कुतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम्
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम्
किमिदं स्वित्कृतो वेति
किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति
देवदेव न वेद्यमहम्
देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम् सर्वतोमुखमायाति
तेजः परमदारुणम्
तेज परमदारुणम् ऑनलाइन किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम् सर्वतोमुखमायाति तेज परमदारुणम् किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम् सर्वतोमुखमायाति तेज परमदारुणम् किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम् सर्वतोमुखमायाति तेज परमदारुणम् किमिदं स्वित्कुतो वेति देवदेव न वेद्म्यहम् सर्वतोमुखमायाति तेज परमदारुणम् Synonyms. Kim, what is? Idam, this. Swit, does it come? Kutaha, where from? Va iti, be either. Deva deva, O Lord of Lords. Na, not. Vedmi, do I know? Aham, I. Sarvataha, all around. Mukham, directions. Ayati, coming from. Tejaha, effulgence. Parama, very much. Darunam, dangerous. Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Translation. O Lord of Lords, how is it that this dangerous effulgence is spreading all around? Where does it come from? I do not understand it. Translation with repetition. O Lord of Lords,
O Lord of Lords,
how is it
how is it
that this dangerous effulgence
how this dangerous effulgence
is spreading all around?
is spreading all around?
Where does it come from?
Where does it come from?
I do not understand it.
I do not understand it.
Purport. Anything that is presented before the personality of Godhead should be so done after due presentation of respectful prayers. That is the standard procedure, and Sri Arjuna, although an intimate friend of the Lord, is observing this method for general information. Thus ends a wonderful transcendental purport. Om Ajnana Timirandhasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurun Militam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Namavom Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristhaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swamin Niti Namine Namaste Saraswate Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. Hare Krishna. So wonderful short purport, just 2 sentences. There is a lecture given by Srila Prabhupada on this verse. The Bhagavatam has many cantos, many verses, so it is not for every verse that we find a lecture from Srila Prabhupada. But this verse has a lecture given by Srila Prabhupada in Vrindavan. So I will try to share what I have learned from that lecture. But first let us understand the verse. Kim idam svit kuto veti deva devana vedmyaham sarvato mukhamayati teja paramadarunam. So this kim, that is what is, so there is a question that is being posed by Arjuna. Kim idam svit kuto veti. So where from is this coming? And he is referring to the Supreme Lord as Deva Deva, O Lord of Lords. It's translated as O Lord of Lords. I am not able to understand where all this is coming from. Sarvato mukham ayati, that is in all directions. Mukham, sometimes mukham is translated as face, but here it is translated as directions. So these words have different meanings in Sanskrit based on the context. So it would be quite childish to attempt to interpret the words just based on some knowledge of Sanskrit or Devanagari or Hindi. It is not possible. Sarvato mukham ayati, coming from Tejah Paramadarunam. So this effulgence or light that is coming from everywhere, it looks very dangerous, very ominous. So the next verse after this, Krishna answers the question, but I think you already know the answer. That we have discussed this before. That who has released the weapon? The nuclear weapon has been released by somebody, and that is causing this heat and light all around Arjuna. So who is that person? Ashwathama. So Ashwathama, fearing for his life, and Arjuna is chasing Ashwathama for having killed, mercilessly killed the sleeping sons of Draupadi. Arjuna is enraged, and he makes a promise to Draupadi that he will bring back the head of Ashwathama, and he departs, and seeing him coming with anger and with great force, Ashwathama is fearing for his life. He runs away, but he sees there is no recourse. He cannot escape from Arjuna, and being in fear for his life, he releases the Brahmastra, which Prabhupada describes as a nuclear weapon or nuclear bomb. He compares it. He says very, very comparable, because it is the strongest weapon. Nuclear weapon is the analogy is being given because it is the most powerful weapon known to mankind today. Of course, Brahmastra is much more powerful and much more subtle, whereas the nuclear weapons of today, they are made with chemicals, radioactive materials, causing fusion reaction and releasing vast amount of energy. It is all made with matter. But the Brahmastra is not made with matter. It is made with another substance which also starts with Ma. And what is that? Mantra. It is made with mantra. So Brahmastra is made from mantra, which is a more subtle form of matter. It is still matter. It is a material science. But it is more subtle form of matter. So this subtle science is not understood by the modern science. In modern science, there is only a study of the gross substances. The subtle substances are not fully understood. They argue that once the body is burnt to ashes, where is the question of the body or a person coming back to life? After all, the body is burnt to ashes. Is there any question of somebody coming back to life from burnt to ashes? It's ashes. You can see the ashes. But there is no possibility. Therefore, there is no concept of a soul. There is no God. What you see is what you get. We see the body, and the body is what you have. The body, when a person dies, the body perishes. It is either buried or burnt in the funeral pyre, and what you have after that is just simply ashes. So where is the question of coming back after that? So the modern scientific world community, it does not accept the possibility of continuation of life once the body is destroyed. And this notion is so widespread in the entire world, and this is so deeply ingrained in our school system, in our social fabric, in political discourse, in every sphere of life, that even a mention of a possibility of life continuing afterwards is looked at as superstition. It is not looked at as science at all. It is eliminated from science, because the measurements, the devices for measurements, they're all based on gross matter. And anything that is beyond the gross matter is completely outside the scope of modern science. It's just not even considered to be subject of study. Their argument is not new. You may think that when I say modern science, that this argument is a new argument. Perhaps it has come after industrial revolution. But before that, this was not the case. That everybody is, fully convinced about the existence of something subtler than gross matter. But that is not the case. There has always existed this philosophy that what you see in front of you is what there is. There is nothing beyond it. And the philosophy is also given in Sanskrit. Bhasmi bhutasya dehasya kutah punar agamano bhavet. Bhasmi bhutasya. Bhuta is a body. Bhasmi. Once the body is body, that is dehasya. Deha is body. Bhutasya, that is a matter, burnt, ashes. Bhutasya. Bhasmi bhutasya is once the body has been burnt to ashes. Bhasmi bhutasya dehasya. Kutaha punaha agamano bhavet. Agamano is coming back. Punaha is again. So where is the question of the body which has been burnt to ashes? Where is the question of that coming back? There is no question. Question does not arise. Therefore, that once the life is over, it is finished. Everything is finished. So this is a atheistic philosophy that has been existing for a very, very long time. But we have got better information from the highest, most perfect source, the Supreme Lord, Sri Krishna, who gives this knowledge in the battlefield to Arjuna, for all of us to understand. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah ajo nitya shashvatoyam purano na hanyate hanyamane sharire. So na hanyate hanyamane sharire, it means that even when the body is destroyed, sharire, the person, the jiva, is actually not destroyed. The spirit soul, there is a spirit soul. Dehino asmin yatha dehe kaumaram yauvanam jara. So there is a Dehi inside the Deha, and that Dehi is not killed even when the Sharira is killed. Ajaha Nityaha Shashvata. So this spirit soul is unborn, eternal, and na jayate mriyate va kadachin na bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah. The translation is, for the soul there is never birth nor death, nor having once been he ever ceases to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. So this very simple knowledge about the soul, it appears that having come in touch with Krishna consciousness, we have heard it so many times that it is deeply now ingrained within all of us. And it seems like a very elementary knowledge to repeat. But actually, if you see Srila Prabhupada's lectures, Srila Prabhupada would always repeat this. He would never, if you see the number of lectures that are there, Srila Prabhupada, a vast number of lectures, he would emphasize this very point. And the reason is that although theoretically we have read this, that na hanyate hanyamane sharire, there is no birth or death, nor having once been, never cease to be. The presence of the soul we have understood theoretically, reading from the books. But we have not really internalized this. It has not become realized knowledge. It has not become realized knowledge because we do not really accept the statements of Acharya at face value. We just simply don't accept. Unlike a person who is fully liberated, we have seen in Bhagavatam many instances of fully liberated persons who are not necessarily devotees, but they are completely detached. And when such a person hears either from the Supreme Lord or from the bona fide representative directly from a pure devotee, he immediately becomes fully self-realized. But we have heard many times from Srila Prabhupada, and we are not becoming fully self-realized. So how do we resolve this contradiction? Because we have seen that, right? We have seen in Bhagavatam that be it Prahalad Maharaj, who heard when he was in the womb, or Parikshit Maharaj, or there are so many persons who have heard once and immediately, they have become pure devotees. So how is it that we are not being impacted by that? The difference is in the word heard. We are not hearing. So just because we are, we should say, hard of hearing, to use a loose term, we are hard of hearing because we are unable, we are not letting voice really go inside. We have got preconceived notions, like a bowl which is already filled. When the bowl is already filled, you cannot fill with water. Correct? First you have to empty the bowl, then only it can be filled with water. So because of our preconceived notions of what is important to us, what gives us pleasure, we are unable to accept this new knowledge. But it's a very, very fundamental and basic knowledge that is available to us only if we are willing to hear it and act upon it in our daily life, in our every decision that we make. This soul is also described as being subtler, very, very, very subtle, very, very fine and atomic particle. This particle is so small that it is incredible, miraculous representation or miraculous creation of the Lord, that such a tiny spirit soul, such a tiny atomic spark, which is 1/10,000th of the tip of the hair. If you see, go to Google search on hairs, what is the width of a hair? Has anyone done that? Because we have heard this many times, right? 1/10,000th of tip of the hair. So what is the width of the hair? Anybody has any idea? It is around 100 angstroms, you can say. That it is in the atomic scale. The width of the hair is very, very small. So the tip of the width of the hair, actually you will not find it anywhere. Why don't you that what you have given is the width of the hair? Can you find what is the tip of the hair? Width of the tip of the hair. You will not find it. No, it's the same thing. That is the width of the hair, not the tip. You will not find the tip actually. It's okay, leave it. You can research offline. You will not find it. Modern science, that is not something of interest, because people cannot conceive it, because hair everybody can see, right? So if somebody wants to give an idea that, oh, this is hairline fracture, they would say. So hair is actually a very common example that is given to illustrate something that is very, very fine, very thin. So but tip of the hair, that you will not see. Even modern science says, oh, that's too less even for us. But in Vedic literature it is given 1/10,000th of the tip of the hair. It is only given to illustrate how fine it is. It's beyond conception. It's inconceivably small. So such a small, tiny atomic particle is the same person, individual, that is inside an ant and inside the elephant and inside Lord Brahma also. So the most powerful, most brainy person, the most powerful intellectual person in the universe, Lord Brahma, also has that same tiny atomic spot, which is 1/10,000th of tip of the hair. And for us also it is the same. Isn't that amazing? So this is not known to modern science. Keshagra shatabhagasya shatam shadrishatmakaha jiva sukshma swarupoyam sankhyatito hi chitkanaha. If we divide the tip of the hair into 100 parts and then take one of these parts and divide it again into 100 parts, that very fine division is the size of but one of the numberless living entities. They are all chitkana, particles of spirit, not matter. So there is a wonderful description of this further in the purport. Spiritual strength is so powerful that a mere atomic portion of spirit can be the biggest brain in the material world. The same spiritual spark is within an ant and within the body of Brahma. According to his karma, material activities, the spiritual spark attains a certain type of body. Material activities are carried out in goodness, passion, and ignorance, or a combination of these. According to the mixture of the modes of material nature, the living entity is awarded a particular type of body. So the science behind why we get this body has been given to us in the literature, Vedic literature, but it is not known to modern science, because the subject matter of modern science deals with gross matter. If you look at another instruction given by Kapil Dev in Srimad Bhagavatam, there is further description of exactly how this body is achieved and what is the science behind that. Because if you see in modern science, even though there is a study of gross matter, the speculation or the understanding of the scientist is that when the semen impregnates the egg through a chemical combination of matter, life is produced. So life comes from matter. This is the understanding of the material scientist, of the modern science. Life comes from matter. And what was the position of that piece of matter prior to that life being formed? It is just matter. It is just transformation of matter. The food that we take becomes our body, and from the body another body is formed. So it's really just, and that food that we take has been matter before, because all that matter is coming from the earth, and the grass is growing on the earth. The nutrients from the earth are drawn into the grass or into some plant or vegetable, and the vegetable goes into the body, and therefore it's just all transformation of the earth from one category of earth to another category of earth. Therefore, any activity that you perform in this life has really no consequence beyond the life. Because what is the consequence of a lump of earth? Let us say you take one tablespoon of salt. And will you say that this tablespoon of salt has committed so many sins, it will suffer in the next life? There is no such notion. Correct? So we are surrounded, we are living in an environment where the predominant philosophy is you are nothing but a tablespoon of salt. And therefore you do whatever you want to do in your life. There is no consequence to that. And so eat, drink, be merry, enjoy the life while it lasts. There's really no point of undertaking any austerities or a higher purpose of life beyond that. Now just see the contradictory nature of this. Is there any meaning of 1 tablespoon of salt trying to help another tablespoon of salt? Why would a tablespoon of salt feel any distress? Let us say that some people are in the world are hungry. Some people are suffering. Somebody is suffering in drought. Somebody is suffering in famine. Somebody is suffering in flood. Somebody is experiencing the forest fires, heat, excessive heat. And then immediately people rush. At the time the scientific temper is kept aside. After all, he's just a lump of salt. What does it matter if he's suffering from heat? What does it matter if he's suffering from hunger? Who is going to, let us say in your house you have got one bottle of some maybe chana masala or pav bhaji masala. Will you think that, oh, today I did not feed water to this pav bhaji masala, let me give some water? Will you feel like that? No. So this theory that we are just matter is contradictory to the activities of the same individuals who call themselves scientists. And yet this contradiction is completely ignored by the mass of the society, and there are atheistic philosophies are so predominant in all walks of life, to the extent that even the mention of the word soul or God is considered taboo in public discourse. But Kapila says, Karmana deva netrena jantur dehopapadyate striya pravishta udaram pumso reta kanashraya. This chit kana that we just saw in the previous verse, that is mentioned here as reta kanashraya. But before we describe what this verse is, karmana deva netrena, it is instructive to see what he says prior to this verse. This is in Canto 3, chapter 31. The first verse he's saying this, karmana deva netrena jantur deho padyate. That is under the supervision of the Supreme Lord, daiva netrena, under the supervision of the Supreme Lord, jantur deha upapadyate. The living entity obtains a body based upon past deeds or past activities. So that is what he's saying. But what kind of a living entity is he talking about? Let us just see that. So Kapila Deva is describing the way in which a person leaves the body and what happens to that body at the time of death or immediately after death. So he says that at death, the man who is engaged in uncontrolled senses, in maintaining a family, dies in great grief, seeing his relatives crying. He dies most pathetically, in great pain and without consciousness. So we are spending our entire life so that we may be surrounded by our family members, especially at the time of old age. If you ask any person who is aged, they will say that, and especially today, they would express regret that in spite of having 3 children, 4 children, whatever the number, nobody is there with them at the time of old age. Because their expectation is that at the time of old age, they should be surrounded by relatives. But even a person who is very successful in cultivating a family which is very loving and affectionate and is present with them at the time of death, what happens to such a person? So that person is engaged, such a person dies in great grief, seeing his relatives crying. So even if a person is dying with surrounded by relatives, what are their relatives? Are they happy about the death of the person? No, they're all crying. So seeing these relatives cry, he also feels great grief. But why are they having pain like this? At death, he sees the messengers of the Lord of death come before him, their eyes full of wrath, and in great fear he passes stool and urine. So this is a fact that a person who dies normally in old age, at the time of death, they are passing stool, urine and vomit. Have you heard about this? It's very normal. Anyone you can ask in your family, elders, those who are very elderly, when they pass away, it's very common that they would pass stool, urine and vomit. All the body will be purging. Modern science will say that, oh, the forces life, the whatever air is there, it is getting pushed out in one final push, and in that everything comes out. But actually Bhagavatam gives a different explanation for that. That is because he is afraid of seeing the messengers of death. As a criminal is arrested for punishment by the constable of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification is similarly arrested by Yamadutas, who bind him by the neck with strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. So there is this concept of subtle body, cover his subtle body, and we will see what that is. But just as a criminal is arrested by punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification. So what is meant by criminal sense gratification? All sense gratification is criminal. But particularly more incriminating sense gratification is that which indulges in animal killing, hurting others for one's own sense gratification. But the fact is, any sense gratification is considered to be criminal. When we are satisfying Krishna's senses, that is lawful. So when we are satisfying our own senses, that is criminal. So how many of us can say that we are not engaged in criminal activities? By show of hands. Anybody can say that I am not engaged in criminal activities? You cannot say that, because simply indulging in sense gratification is criminal. So what is the kind of death that is awaiting us? We are about to see. So what does Yamaraja do first? Or the constables of Yamaraja, what do? Not even Yamaraja coming. For us he will not come. So constables of Yamaraja, they bind him by the neck with a strong rope and cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. They cover his subtle body means they give something called Yatana Sharira, a special kind of a body, like an exoskeleton on top of the subtle body, so that the punishment that is about to come can actually be endured. While carried by the constables of Yamaraja, he is overwhelmed and trembles in their hands. While passing on the road, he is bitten by dogs, and he can remember the sinful activities of his life. He is thus terribly distressed. Under the scorching sun, the criminal has to pass through the roads of hot sand with forest fires on both sides. He is whipped on the back by the constables because of his inability to walk, and he is afflicted by hunger and thirst. But unfortunately, there is no drinking water, no shelter, and no place for rest on the road. While passing on that road to the abode of Yamaraja, he falls down in fatigue, and sometimes he becomes unconscious, but is forced to rise again. In this way, he is very quickly brought to the presence of Yamaraja. Thus, he has to pass 99,000 yojanas within 2 or 3 moments, and then he is at once engaged in torturous punishment for which he is destined to suffer. He is placed in the midst of burning pieces of wood, and his limbs are set on fire. In some cases, he is made to eat his own flesh or have it eaten by others. His entrails are pulled out by the hounds and vultures of hell, even though he is still alive to see it, and he is subject to the torment by serpents, scorpions, gnats, and other creatures that bite him. Next, his limbs are lopped off and torn asunder by elephants. He is hurled down from hilltops, and he is also held captive either in water or in cave. Men and women whose lives were built upon indulgence in illicit sex life are put into many kinds of miserable conditions in hells known as Thamishra, Andha Thamishra, and Raurava. Lord Kapila continued, "My dear mother, it is sometimes said that we experience hell or heaven on this planet, for hellish punishments are sometimes visible on this planet also. After leaving this body, the man who maintained himself and his family members by sinful activities suffers a hellish life, and his relatives suffer also." So it is not only that that person is suffering, but his relatives are also suffering. So if we are thinking that a sinful person in our family will not affect us, that is not the case. Anybody who's sinful in our family, it affects us in this way. He goes alone to the darkest regions of hell after quitting the present body, and the money he acquired by envying other living entities is the passage money with which he lives this world. Thus, by the arrangement of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the maintainer of kinsmen is put into hellish condition to suffer by his sinful activities like a man who has lost his wealth. Therefore, a person who is very eager to maintain his family and kinsmen simply by black methods certainly goes to the darkest region of hell, which is known as Andha Tamishra. having gone through all the miserable hellish conditions and having passed in a regular order through the lowest forms of animal life prior to human birth, and thus having purged of his sins, one is reborn again as a human being on this earth. So that is what we have been through already. We have already been through this process. We have already suffered all of this. We have been through the Andhatamishra hell, and after having once again gone back to the animal species, we have gradually come back after species after species after species. We have come back to our obtain this human form of life. That is what we have already been through. That was the price we had to pay for indulging in sense gratification and keeping maintenance of the family as a prime goal of life. So we have paid the price for it. And then Kapil Deva says, Sri Bhagavan Vacha Karmana Devanaitrena Jantur Deho Papadyate Striya Pravishta Udaram Pumso Reta Kanashraya. The personality of Godhead said, under the supervision of the Supreme Lord and according to the result of his work, the living entity, the soul, is made to enter into the womb of a woman through the particle of male semen to assume a particular type of body. So here, one important word that Prabhupada points out in this verse is Reta Kanashreyaha. Let me just read the extract from this purport. The Supreme Lord as Super Soul is always present within the individual soul. He directs material nature to supply a particular type of body to the individual soul according to the result of his work, and the material nature supplies it. So how are we getting the body? Supreme Lord is present within the soul, and he directs the material nature to supply a particular type of body. So here just make a note that the super soul is present within the individual soul. So the soul is how big? 1/10,000th of tip of the hair. And inside that soul, what is there? Super soul is there inside that soul. So inside that soul he is there, and being inside that soul, he directs the material nature to supply a particular type of body to that individual soul according to the result of his work, and the material nature supplies it. Here one word, Reta Kanashrayaha, is very significant because it indicates that it is not the semen of the man that creates life within the womb of a woman. Rather, the living entity, the soul, takes shelter in a particle of semen and is thus pushed into the womb of a woman. Then the body develops. There is no possibility of creating a living entity without the presence of the soul simply by sexual intercourse. The materialistic theory that there is no soul and that a child is born simply by material combination of sperm and ovum is not very feasible. It is unacceptable. So this concept of subtle and gross matter is completely out of scope for modern science. So let us look at what are these different forms of matter going from subtle to gross. So first there is amongst the Pancha Mahabhutas, or what are known as 5 gross elements. Within them also there is a progression from subtle to gross. The most subtle of all the Pancha Mahabhutas is ether. And in ether, sound is present. You can hear. So with the ether is a form of matter in which only hearing is possible. You cannot see ether, you cannot feel ether, you cannot taste ether, you cannot smell ether. But sound can travel in ether. So hearing is possible. Then from that, air is produced. And air is something in which you can hear, so you can hear, and you can feel, you can touch the air. But you cannot see the air, you cannot taste, you cannot smell. Then from that, fire is produced, and Prabhupada gives a wonderful example which which is so scientific. He gives example that in air, by rubbing of air, electricity is produced. Have you considered this? Can you give an example how rubbing of air electricity is produced? No, that is friction. That is what rubbing means. But where have you seen rubbing of air? Like just there is air and rubbing and electricity is produced. Clouds. Yeah. What happens there? Electricity is produced. So rubbing of air. So essentially, yeah, lightning. So lightning, you can see flashes of lightning in the air. So that is coming nothing, it is just coming from air. Essentially lightning is produced from air. So that is fire. So lightning and fire, they are equivalent. So from air, fire is produced, which you can see. You can see the fire, you can see the lightning, correct? And from that, water is produced. When there is fire, we know even in modern science, what is the byproduct of fire? Water, correct? So water comes from fire. So from fire, water is produced, and water is something that you can even taste. And then from water, earth is produced, and earth, that is something that you can smell also. So all these Panchamahabhutas or gross matter actually has a progression in the different elements. From ether, compared to earth, water is more subtle. Compared to water, fire is more subtle. Compared to fire, air is more subtle. And compared to air, ether is more subtle. But there is something that is more subtle than these 5 elements, and that is the mind. The mind is more subtle than these 5 elements. If you ask the modern scientists about mind, that there is no such thing. They cannot figure out what that is. Although there is a Department of Mental Health, I just saw there was a posting from WPI that they opened a center for mental health now recently, just yesterday. It's a new, big, swanky, nice, like comfortable lounge kind of a place where somebody can come, sit down, relax. It's a very nice space that they've created. And so there is a Department of Mental Health, but if you ask what is mind, there is no answer for it. It's just a word in the English language, but actually there is no knowledge of what mind is. So you know that I have a mind, I know that you have a mind, but from modern science perspective, it's out of scope for study. So, but according to our Vedic wisdom, there is something called mind which is subtler than this gross matter. And there is something more subtle than the mind, and that is intelligence. And more subtle than intelligence is false ego. And together, these 3 things constitute the subtle body. So this combination of false ego, mind and intelligence, they are the elements that make up the subtle body. And this subtle body is covering the spirit soul, and at the time of death, this subtle body, which is constituted of false ego, intelligence and mind, is given an exoskeleton, is given an additional covering. That's what is given in Bhagavatam, which I read this right. What is that exact sentence? Yatana Sharira, but I'm just reading the translation. In a criminal sense, as the criminal is arrested for punishment by the constables of the state, a person engaged in criminal sense gratification is similarly arrested by Yamadutas, who bind him by the neck with a strong rope. So how is it possible to bind a dead body? The dead body is not going anywhere, right? Dead body is going to the funeral pyre, is getting burnt. So when they say bind him by the neck, it is actually the subtle body that is being bound. So the subtle body, consisting of mind, intelligence and false ego, is bound. So it has a neck, and in that neck there is a rope that is being bound. And cover his subtle body so that he may undergo severe punishment. So he is given a covering, that subtle body is given a covering on top. So beyond this false ego, mind and intelligence, there is something, but we have studied in the past, and I just want to quickly revise that. You have heard this before, that of course beyond this subtle body and gross body, there is a spirit soul which is covered within the subtle body, and then the subtle body is covered within the gross body. Now the spirit soul that we have studied is completely spiritual, correct? It has got no tinge of matter. So how is it that the spirit soul is able to interact with the subtle body that is covered? For example, you have, let us say the spirit soul, which is what we have been told, all of us, although we are just hearing this theoretically, we don't have it internalized. But let us say for a minute, you just understand that spirit soul is completely eternal, fully spiritual, has no tinge of matter, and has no birth or death. So such a tiny particle of spirit soul, and which can go anywhere, sarvagataha, right? It can go in any planetary system, anywhere it can go, anywhere it can come. So if there is some subtle body that is been given to that, what will it make of it? Let us say, I'm just giving a random example. Let us say that in this room, while offering arati, there is a agarbatti that has been lit, and agarbatti is offered to the Lord, and very opulent temple. Let us say we offer 7 agarbattis are lit, or even 3. This is a small room, and then the room is filled with agarbatti smoke. Now, what is our? I mean, you can smell it and you can take advantage of the prasadam, but beyond that, that agarbatti is got nothing to do with our body. Correct? My identity is different from the agarbatti's identity. Even though I am smelling the agarbatti, the fumes are going inside my lungs. Correct? So fumes are going inside me, and I am able to smell it. What does it mean? Some particles of the fume are going inside my head, inside my body, and the signals are going to my brain. Correct? That's how I am able to smell it. So there is some receptacle somewhere in the nose or somewhere where some agarbatti particles are touching me, and then are they coming out after that? No, they are assimilated within the body. So actually you can say, I am agarbatti now. But it is not like that. We have got nothing to do with that. We sense the agarbatti, but then we are not the agarbatti. Correct? But how is it that when spirit soul is covered by the subtle matter, it is so much trapped within that, to the degree that it thinks, I am now this subtle body. How does that? Or I am now this gross body. So when it is trapped within this gross body, how is it that it starts to identify with this gross body? And that binding substance is the subtle body. So this is what Prabhu has explained before, that for the soul which is completely Satchid Ananda, for it to bind with the gross body, which is made of the 5 gross elements that we just saw, which is Asat, Achit and Nirananda, there has to be a binding agent, and that binding agent is the mind, which is part of the subtle body. And when this mind sometimes is attracted to or is leaning towards the spiritual identity, what happens when the mind is attracted to spiritual identity? Then that is called a spiritual mind. And some other times when the mind is attracted to the identity as a gross body, then it is called materialistic mind. So this mind can either be spiritually minded, can be a spiritual mind, or it can be a materialistic mind. Beyond this, how do we break this? So how do we take this mind and convert it to a spiritual mind? Because that is our goal now. Because we understand that this gross body is Asat, Achit and Nirananda, and to be engrossed in that gross body means to go through this hellish conditions that we have just heard from Kapila Deva. We have already gone through that. We have identified with the gross body. We have spent lifetimes in trying to satisfy that gross body and in that identity. And as a result, we have been identified as a criminal. We have been dragged into the various different hells, under Tamishra hell, Raurava, all those places we have been to. And after that, we have come down and gone through all the animal lives. And finally, we got again this human body. So shouldn't our goal be, therefore, to see how we can live, how we can spend our life in spiritual state of mind? So now, for the mind to become a spiritual state of mind, the mind has to interact with spirit soul, has to understand the presence of the spirit soul. But the mind is currently already in the materialistic state. It is in the state that you see. It is completely towards the gross body. How do we pull that mind from the materialistic state into a spiritual state? So for that, we require an external force, a force which is completely spiritual, because the soul is in a conditioned state, completely sleeping state. We are unaware of the soul. Had the soul been awakened, soul could definitely pull the mind. But the soul is in a conditioned state. Our own spirit soul is completely sleeping state. Therefore, we cannot expect the soul to come and awaken the mind. And therefore, there is one element which exists in the physical material realm that we are in, and also exists in the spiritual realm. And that element is what can shake us out of this materialistic state of mind and bring us into the spiritual state of mind. So to before we get to what is that element, let us look at this. Sorry, the verse is wrong. Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punyakarmanam te dvanda moha nirmukta bhajante mam dhadavrata. So the reason why we are not able to move from the materialistic mind into the spiritual mind is that we are having this karmana devanetrena. Because of that we have got this body, and that's all happening because of our past sinful activities. We have got so many sins in the past that the accumulated quantity of sin is preventing us from going into spiritual directions. If ordinary course, if we had to overcome that by our own effort, let us say somebody were to wake up and say that, oh, I have been in Andhatamishra, hell, I have been in all the animalistic forms of life, I have got this human body, let me purify my mind. If you were to, by your own effort, try to purify your mind, that is not an easy thing. Very, very, very difficult thing. Because the requirement for being able to engage in the devotional service of the Lord, which is the natural consequence of becoming spiritually minded, the requirement is one has to be, the sinful actions have to be completely eradicated. Antagatam. So yesham to antagatam papam means, antagatam word has been translated as completely eradicated. So yes, we can counteract sins, for example, simply by suffering our sins, we are counteracting. Right? Let us say you have said that, oh, I have already suffered Andhatamishra hell, Raurava hell, everything I have suffered. I have gone through all the animalistic forms. Now I am purified, I have come to this human life, and therefore my sins are actually very less. So let me just live the life, let me suffer the sins so that my reactions will go away, and thereby I'll get purified. How long will that take? Long. Why long? No, I'm not. I'm thinking that I'm not doing sins because I'm just trying to suffer the results of my sin. I'm not consciously trying to do any sin. Still, it takes a very long time to counteract the sins. Why? The answer is something you already gave, but it is slight. I'll just change what you said. You said that if you keep doing sins, sins will never go away. But it is not by conscious effort that I'm doing sin. I'm thinking that I'm leading a sinless life. But actually, unconsciously, we are engaging in sinful activities every moment. Because of our materialistically engaged mind is engaged fundamentally in sense gratification, and that is sinful by very nature. Therefore, every moment that we live, we are accumulating a mountain of sins, which will require, we are already kept a reserved seat in Andhatamishra hell, one seat is there in Raurava hell, one is there in some other hell. It's all already reserved. Seats are reserved. It's just waiting for our lives to finish. So by our own effort, if we want to purify ourselves, it's very, very difficult. Yes, somebody may take up to the process of dhyana yoga or jnana yoga, but even if you take up to these processes and by empirical study that yes, I am not the matter, I am spirit, and even achieve the highest state that is possible in that process of study, but still after some point of time you will fall down, because that is not the natural state, constitutional position of the spirit soul is not to simply be in a suspended animation in an impersonal Brahmajyoti. Aruhya krichena param padam tatah patanti adho anadhrita yusmad angriyaha. So no matter how much you think you are going to the highest position, from parama padam, that is the person who is following the process of jnana yoga or dhyana yoga, they think that there is some highest position. Actually, there is not the highest position, but they think there is highest position. That position which you consider to be highest in that state, you will fall down. Patanti adho anadhrita yusmad angriya, because they have failed to render devotional service. They have failed to execute devotional service. Unless we take up to the process of devotional service, it is not possible for us to counteract these sins and get out of these sins. It is not possible at all. And how that is possible? The only way that can be done is by the association of a pure devotee. So Prabhupada says that counteraction of the sin is only possible by associating with a pure devotee. There is no other way. The pure devotee teaches you how to engage in devotional service, and gradually by associating with the Vani of the spiritual master or pure devotee, we come to know our constitutional position. That is how the mind is moving from materialistic mind, is pulled into the spiritual mind. Once we understand the constitutional position, then we are able to render devotional service to the Lord. So there is a portion of the purport which I'll just quickly read. For those who are sinful, atheistic, foolish and deceitful, it is very difficult to transcend the duality of desire and hate. Only those who have passed their lives in practicing regulative principles of religion, who have acted piously, and who have conquered sinful reactions, can accept devotional service and gradually rise to the pure knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So this, what it says is, what is our criteria? If we had to do it on our own, we have to lead our complete life practicing in principles of religion. How many of us can say that we have followed principles of religion? We don't even know what they are. Who have acted piously. How many of us can say we have only acted piously, nothing impious? Can we say that? We cannot say that. And who have conquered sinful reaction can accept devotional service. So we are not qualified under any of these criteria. This elevation is possible in Krishna consciousness in the association of pure devotees who can deliver one from delusion. So in spite of not having any qualifications, under this requirement of antagatam papam, jananam punya karmanam, we don't have any of those qualifications. But still, it is possible to achieve that state simply by the association of pure devotees who alone can deliver one from delusion. If one actually wants to be liberated, he must render service to the devotees. But one who associates with materialistic people is on the path leading to the darkest region of existence. So this is actually referring to the Andhatamishra hell and Raurava hell. That is the darkest region of existence. And when does that happen? Associates with materialistically minded people. One of them is ourselves. So if we associate with our own senses, that is going in the materialistic mind, and then our seat which has been reserved in Andhatamishra hell, it becomes strong. And soon we may start getting some promotional material, right? Sometimes we have seen that if you start going to Google and do some search for some, maybe college admission, you'll start getting university applications, because somewhere in Google they understood that you want college admissions. So similarly, if you are doing sinful activities, from Andhatamishra hell some promotional material will come, and you will be given some glimpse of the hellish conditions here itself first. So all the devotees of the Lord, however, traverse this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusions. So all the devotees of the Lord, they are traversing this earth just to recover the conditioned souls from their delusions. So the pure devotees who are traversing, it is only for us because we are not qualified to meet the condition of yesham tu andagatam papam. So what is the exact mechanism by which these devotees engage us in devotional service? That is actually through the medium of sound. Because sound is something that is present in the material realm, it is also present in the spiritual realm. According to, and with this 1 or 2 points I'll just stop here. This is a quotation which has been given in one article written by Srila Prabhupada in Back to Godhead magazine in 1975. The quotation is from Gospel. In the beginning there was the Word, and the Word was God. Word was with God, and the Word was God. The same was in the beginning with God. All things were made by Him, and without Him was not anything made that was made. In Him was life, and the life was the light of men. And the light shineth in darkness, and the darkness comprehended it not. This is not a sectarian view that sound is actually the origin of everything. So in the spiritual world there is sound, and from that the material realm, the entire cosmic manifestation comes from that. So the sound Omkara or Hare Krishna Mahamantra is actually the origin of everything. So this sound which is there in the spiritual world has been brought down to the material realm by the Supreme Lord Himself, coming as Lord Chaitanya, and that is then distributed to all the conditioned souls by the mercy of Nityananda Prabhu, and in the disciplic succession by our beloved spiritual master Srila Prabhupada. So without that sound which is coming all the way from the spiritual world, it is not possible for us to convert our materialistically minded mind into spiritual mind, and without us it is not possible for us to overcome our sinful reaction. And if we don't do that, it is not that we have many more lifetimes remaining, but actually there is a reservation that is waiting for us in the hellish planets. I'll just, due to lack of time, I'll go past this. but I'll read this two verses from this wonderful Vaishnava song. Hari Hari Bipale Janama Gunaino, Manishya Janama Paya, Radha Krishna na Bhajiya, Janiya Shunya Bishakhaino. So, knowingly, we are drinking the poison of not worshipping Radha and Krishna despite having taken a human birth. So, Narottam Das Thakur is singing this song. It is on behalf of all of us. That we have gone through all the animal species, and somehow difficulty we got this human life. But we are wasting this human life by not worshipping Radha Krishna. And that is equivalent to drinking poison knowingly. And then he says, Golokera Premadhana Harinama Sankirtana Ratina Janmilo Kenetai Samsara Bishanale Diba Nishi Hayajwale Juraite na Koinu Upai. So the treasure of divine love in Goloka Vrindavan has descended as a congregational chanting of the Lord Hari's holy name. Why did my attraction for the chanting never come about? Day and night, my heart burns from the fire of the poison of worldliness, and I have not taken to the means to relieve it. So, the process of relieving this fire of material existence that Arjuna is feeling all around him is felt every day by us. But we are trying to counteract that through material means, using what we consider to be the dint of our own efforts, rather than the prescribed method which is actually going to work, which is actually going to relieve us. So on these occasions when we are hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam, is an opportunity for us to take a renewed pledge to take up to the process of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra under the guidance of our beloved spiritual master, and give the opportunity to our materialistically minded mind to be attracted to the message of the Lord, to the form of the Lord in the sound representation. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare. When we follow this instruction, then the knowledge about our spiritual identity becomes manifest in our heart. Divya Gyan Hriday Prakashito. So the knowledge about our identity otherwise cannot be understood by simply reading books. Although that theoretical knowledge is important, but the realized knowledge will only come when we associate with the Supreme Satchidananda, which is available to us in the form of this sound. So that is the process for us to actually overcome the sinful reactions that we have got and be saved from the terrible fate that awaits us. So with that, I'll stop here and see if you have any questions or comments.
Has their own individual soul, right? So how does it move to the rest of the family members?
Te apisha tantriyam urudhamni baddhaha. So there is a verse in Bhagavatam. Prahlad Maharaj says, Andha yathandhair upagiya mana te apisha tantriyam urudhamni baddhaha. That is, when you follow the blind and the follower, they both fall into a ditch. In a materialistically mind that we have got, materialistic mind, when we are following that, then when the relative is, or relatives, bandhu, family members and anyone that we associate with, a part of us, and Prabhu has also explained this many times, if there is a person who is materialistically minded, and we are not pure devotees, we are conditioned mind. When we open our heart to such a person, and we reciprocate our feelings with such a person, it is not possible for us to be not afflicted. It is like the second wave of COVID that was there in India. Just by going to the window or even staying in your house, the infection comes. So powerful. Simply by opening our heart, and that is something that we do all the time. Who does not have friends or colleagues to whom we feel, feeling compassionate is good. But our vision is not perfect spiritual vision. Therefore, when we associate with people, it should be assumed, we should just take it for granted that we have been infected. We should just take it for granted. And because we are infected by everybody else, we are following them. In a way, they think, oh, this person is enjoying like this. So a part of us sets that as a goal. I should also enjoy like that. And therefore, we are not truly alone. We are not independent that, oh, that person is sinning his own way, why it should impact me. Urudhamni baddha te apisha tantriyam. Urudhamni baddha means, Prabhupada explains that when you do sin together, you also suffer together. Just like your the animal slaughter that's going on a mass scale in the society today, right? Cow slaughter that's going on, or all the animal slaughter, and everybody there is a description of all the people who are engaged in that, how they share the sin. What are the people? The one who kills the animal, and then the butcher, the one who sells the animal, so kill it, then sell some trader in between. The butcher who cuts it, then somebody who cooks it, eats it, everything. Everybody is bound in that. And the suffering is also together. They have all participated in the supply chain of sin. So everybody together in one shot, one flight will collapse, one crash, or there'll be one flood in which so many people are washed away. Everybody thinks this is all by chance. It is not by chance. When there is a world war, so many people die together. In one bomb is dropped, everybody is finished. Because they have sinned together. They will all go with the ropes together. They will all enjoy company in the path to Yamaraja. And they will all go through the Raurava and all those hells that we heard. They will all be together. You can enjoy together. So we are not exempt from the relatives. The only way to get exemption is to dissociate with matter. If we have a spiritual knowledge, understanding, our mind becomes spiritually minded, and we are not associating with materially minded persons, only then you are liberated from the influence of others. Yes. We cannot touch the subtle body, but the Yamadutas, they have subtle bodies themselves, and the rope that they use is also subtle, so they have a mechanism to do that. We have no knowledge of how that can be done. I think that is a secret. If you want to know the secret, you have to become one of the Yamadutas. Then it will be revealed. Any other questions? If not, we'll stop here. Grantra Srimad Bhagavatam ki, Jagat Guru Shila Prabhupada ki, Nitai Gaur Premanand.